2022, the focus in Nyanza region is the completion of these mega projects that had been started by the national government way back in 2018 or earlier. And that is something that will turn around the economy of this region. And so as we wait for Ukur Yatani to do that, all our eyes are on these particular projects. Back to you, Studio.
Thank you very much, our reporter Kevin Ogutu joining us from Kisumu. Live pictures, as you can see right there, is Ambassador Ukur Yatani, who is the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, just on the steps of our Treasury building, right there, flanked by several officials of the Treasury, just moments before he makes his way to Parliament buildings. The ceremonial briefcase right there containing the speech and the documents in which he is going to present the budget statement to Kenyans. And of course, the total budget for this year is 3.6 trillion shillings, the highest budget yet so far in this country, which is up from 2.94 trillion shillings during the 2020-2021 financial year. Now, the money, of course, Treasury CS Cabinet, rather CS Ukur Yatani, has said that the money will come from loans and grants, total revenue, and of course, the income tax, the VAT, excess duty, import duty, and other taxes. And while there is a budget deficit of about 1.56 trillion shillings. But remember also, this comes at a time where there has been pending bills of 300 billion shillings, which have been, of course, which President Uhuru Kenyatta directed to be offset. But as I had promised you, even as you pay attention to what is happening at Treasury building, right here in studio, I did promise you about that conversation that my colleague Abby Agina, who is right here in studio, is going to have, and he's going to be speaking to a gentleman who operates in the shoe shine business. Over to you, Abby. What more can you tell us, and what have you prepared for Kenyans this afternoon?
Well, many thanks indeed. A momentous time it is for the country, even as the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Ukur Yatani, prepares to make his procession to the National Assembly, where he'll be tabling his tax and spending plans for the financial year 2021-2022. What will be of great significance to many Kenyans is how will he cushion the wananchi in regards to fewer taxes, and of course touching on very important issues around how will he finance the government budget. And joining me right now we have Mr. Chico, who is a shoe shiner, and he is one of the Kenyans who will be just giving us his perspectives. As I reverse the roles, today I want to brush your shoes as you tell me, how has business been?
Well, Abby, thank you so much for inviting me here.
Yep.
Business has been not good since this COVID thing came.
Yeah.
Apparently, even before the COVID, mambo tu ilikuwa ngumu. So when COVID came, it even made things worse. So apparently where we are sitting is that mwananchi, we don't know where to start or where to go. So many of us, a layman, would not even understand what this budget is all about. Because if you don't caution mwananchi and you make me afford this polish at a cheaper price, initially we used to buy these at 40 shillings. Right now it's at 100, and we don't know what Ukur Yatani is going to say today. Because people think that when fuel is increased, mwananchi wa kawaida is not affected. It affects us. 80% of whatever we use is petroleum manufactured. All the polish that you use in your shoes is petroleum manufactured. So kama unakuja kusema umeongeza mafuta, already umeongeza. That polish, the big black polish used to buy at 90 shillings. Right now it's at 300 and something. And today Ekuru atujui atadecide aje tena from that point. So tuko hapa, atujui which direction to go.
All right.
Atujui venye kila kitu itaendelea after hii budget. So watu wengine hata hawajui budget inamaanisha.
All right. And Chico, we understand the CS is heading to Parliament, as you can see on the screens there. And for you as a Kenyan, what are your expectations in regards to things like the cost of just doing business, issues to do with taxes? Unaonaje hii maneno?
Abi, the only way hii government inaweza saidia mwananchi wa kawaida ni ku make sure that hizi vitu tunatumia is available. We are not even asking for much. Make sure that these things are available and they are cheap. We can afford it. Once I can afford to buy this, whatever my materials that I work with, my tools that I'm working with, then I will get something to take home to my family. Sasa kama umekuja ukaongeza mafuta, umeongeza hii brush, I cannot get this brush at an affordable price. That means that thing that I'm supposed to take home is already affected.
Yeah.
It's completely affected.
Co-affected.
Now, this thing triggers down to that small boy, my son at home, who doesn't know why dad cannot afford a loaf of bread, yet he used to afford it. Unaona?
Naelewa.
Yeah, so at that point.
So as we can see there, we have the motorcade of the CS. He's making his way to Parliament, where he'll be tabling the budget under tight security. And Chico, as we finish with you, in terms of this budget, what are some of the other things that you feel young people are struggling with in the business?
We're being told that kuna hii pesa ya youth. I can tell you I've never seen that money. Ni story tu nimesikia. Mimi sijawahi ona hiyo pesa. Sijui yotoka wapi, sijui enda wapi. But the figures zile niko very sure watasoma hapa saizi. They're very huge figures ambazo zinaenda kwa youth. Ukichukua hizo figures ukaleta kwa youth directly, I can tell you, you will hear the effect. We've seen with the NYS. Unaona vijana kila mahali wanafanya kazi. So we don't know where this money ya youth na hizi nini wanapatia grants, wanapatia youth ziko. We've never seen them. And if they are there, maybe accessing them is a problem. Wameweka in a situation whereby we cannot even access that money.
Asante sana Chico, and tunaomba kwamba tutaona vitu zimefanyika vizuri.
Hopefully.
All right, we've been speaking there to Chico, who is a shoe shiner at Kenyatta Market. Well, live pictures coming to us there, courtesy of our crews who are covering this live procession of the CS as he's driving to Parliament. And of course, a lot of expectations from Kenyans. Will he be able to balance the budget issues? We want to now bring in one of our guests who is joining us from our city center studios, and that is Madam Eva Otieno, who is the lead at Standard Chartered Bank here in Kenya. She's very instrumental in matters strategy. And Madam Eva, if you can hear me, what are top of mind your expectations? What would you want to see moving into the budget?
Yes, so thank you very much for that. Indeed, this is quite a large budget, one of the largest that we have seen or we would expect to see, about 3.6 trillion KES, if that is what is going to come out at. What we are looking out for is with regards to how this budget is going to be financed. So we know that the 2 trillion taxes and revenue, which is one of the avenues of financing, but we've also heard that loans and grants will form a big portion of the financing. We also know that the government has been keen on concessional financing, and we know that the Kenya government is now under the IMF program, which is one of the ways in which the Kenya government was able to get cheaper financing as opposed to more expensive financing. So those are some of the factors that we'll be looking out for in the budget reading, because we know that the government will need to create a very delicate balancing act with regards to raising much needed revenue in this pandemic year, but also being able to provide for the Kenyan people as well.
And Madam Eva, let's also talk about when you look at where we are today. We have 3 other countries presenting their budgets, that is Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And from a trends perspective, how have the economies held up during the COVID-19 pandemic? We've seen different stimulus programs coming on board. Have these stimulus programs been effective? And from your end of the coin, what are some of the other mitigation measures that we should anticipate when it comes to economic revival?
Okay, so what we have seen from other African countries, maybe if you can look at regionally, is that the African countries have actually gotten into the pandemic with very limited fiscal space. And what that would mean is that there was limited ability to spend or space to spend just because of the level of which debt had risen over the years because of the infrastructure projects that the governments had taken up. to be able to plug in the infrastructure deficit that had been there for years. Now, looking ahead, what we could see is more reliance on external financing, so more foreign currency financing. So, for example, we know that Uganda had just concluded an IMF program of $1 billion, which is quite significant for the size of the Ugandan economy. What we've also seen in Tanzania is starting of negotiations for an IMF facility to be able to help Tanzania navigate through the COVID pandemic. So some of the trends that we are seeing is more of these regional governments going towards external financing, but more at concessional rates, so cheaper loans, and being able to exhaust that. We could also see the government turning towards the World Bank as well to see how they could raise more concessional financing in that regard. So in terms of the trend, we are seeing governments being more aware of the level of debt and also looking at ways in which they can manage their cost, given the infrastructure appetites that the governments still have. And we are also seeing a trend where governments are looking towards public-private partnerships so that they can manage these costs. At Standard Chartered, we've also had...
Please carry on.
At Standard Chartered, we have a view that economic growth may pick up in 2021, but this is mainly because of the fact that 2020 had very low growth, so it's more from a technical perspective and not really that real economic growth has picked up. What we could see is a shift towards the Big Four agenda, especially in this penultimate year of President Uhuru Kenyatta, just so that they could be able to meet this promise that they had made to Kenyans in previous years.
All right. And Madam Eva, finally, in regards to our debt numbers, we've been seeing quite a number of red flags from different experts. I don't know, what position do you hold on this matter of debt?
Okay, so what we see with regards to debt is a rapid rise in the debt levels, particularly when you look at it also as a percentage of GDP. The view is that Kenya's debt is still sustainable, but it's at high risk of debt distress, and that's a view that has also been shared by the IMF. What we are looking at in the coming years is the Kenya government reducing its budget deficit, particularly as a percentage of GDP. So we'd also be keen to hear where the 2020 GDP numbers came out. What we also know that's happening from a regional perspective is the discussions with regards to the debt service suspension initiative that would provide debt relief for countries, low to middle income countries that have been affected by the pandemic. This, we expect, would also moderate the foreign currency debt servicing that Kenya is expected to shoulder in the coming fiscal years.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Eva Otieno from Standard Chartered Bank, just giving us the insights in regards to high expectations and that of other analysts in the country. Well, live pictures there coming to you. We are covering all angles as the CS, the man of the moment, the man of the hour, makes his way to the National Assembly. What will be the magic words that he'll be pronouncing when it comes to the budget? We'll be taking a deep perspective in this. We still have with us a seasoned cocktail of analysts. We have with us Mr. Kwame Owino, who is joining us virtually. We also have with us Mr. Ken Gishinga, who is the CEO of Mentoria. And we also have former Mandera Senator, that is Mr. Bill Okero, who will be helping me drive this discussion as we get into the budget reading. Remember, this is the second budget that Ambassador Ukur Yatani is overseeing, but it is the 8th year of the Jubilee administration in office, and we'll be keenly monitoring and giving you reactions from across the country. We'll be telling you what the Kenyans have to say in regards to this budget. And I understand we can we also now engage Mr. Kwame Owino?
live pictures at the Harambee Avenue as well as Parliament buildings, where the motorcade, or rather the vehicle ferrying Treasury CS Ambassador Ukur Yatani, the man of the moment, is making its way to Parliament buildings under tight security. And we expect him to, of course, enumerate what the government expects to, rather what the government portends for the country in the financial year 2021-2022. Earlier on, we did see the leadership of the August House lining up to receive the Treasury CS. That is, we did see the Majority Leader, Amos Kimunya. We also saw the Chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Kadini Kega, as well as other legislators lining up. As you can see right there, the motorcade of the CS making its way. As I've mentioned, the Chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee and other members of Parliament legislators, of course, donned in the traditional pocket flower right there by the, to signify this important day that is also significant with the briefcase that is that Ambassador Ukur Yatani, the Treasury CS, will be carrying today. Remember, he will be doing this for the second time since his appointment as a CS, having taken over from CS Rotich 2 years ago. That's when he will be making his speech today at the floor of the House to the membership of the House, and of course Kenyans will be watching. As Ali promised and as Ali mentioned, my colleague Abi Agina is in studio with his panelists. Over to you, Abi.
Thank you so much, George Maringa. We'll give you wall-to-wall coverage of the budget. We'll be looking at different perspectives into this budget. Our teams in Parliament, including Chris Thairo, Brenda Kerubo, we will have Noah Kipkemboi, Brian George Otieno, and of course our regions. We also have teams on standby just to give you the latest in this budget coverage. Well, live pictures there. The motorcade has made its way into the final roundabout to get into the National Assembly, and the CS seated in his executive car. And of course, if you remember, this car model is the Passat, which was introduced during President Uhuru Kenyatta's reign when he was in Treasury. He did make some major austerity measures on government spending, and this is an iconic moment for the people of Kenya, just revisiting back in time when the country was able to sufficiently fund its national budget. And well, under tight security there, we see the CS accompanied by different security arms in government. And of course, it will be interesting to just get to see what Kenyans have to say in regards to this particular budget. Will he meet their expectations? What will be the reactions from the politicians as well? What are some of the key issues? Well, joining me also with us right now in studio, we have with us former Mandera Senator, that is Mr. Bill Okero, as well as Mr. Ken Gishinga, Chief Economist at Mentoria. And thank you, gentlemen, for making time for us. And let me start off with Mr. Bill Okero. Many are expectant, but at the same time, we are putting so much pressure on a minister who is serving in a very difficult economic environment. Are we being too overambitious with the expectations we have over him?
Thank you. I think the media is creating a lot of hype about this budget. From the 2010 Constitution, the budget process was changed. Everything that minister is going to talk about is already in public domain. You have the budget policy statement from February. You have the printed estimates. There's nothing new he's going to read. All he does is a summary of whatever is in this document. So I don't think we should create so much expectations that there's something in that briefcase that has not been had, which is not out there.
All right.
But I think also the minister is doing what probably some of these other many countries in the world, or in particular in Africa, are doing. Have an expansionist or expansionary fiscal policy where you spend more to try and revive the economy. This is the Because last year our economy contracted by 0.6%.
Correct.
And so what the government, like others, expect is that if they put in more money into the economy, they will be creating, a demand and, reviving the economy. But I think for Kenya, really, there's, for every country, there's specific issues, really. And for us, the main concern is not about just the size of the budget. Or the fact that they're going to borrow, most of that money. It's about the spending. The challenge we have had in this country is always about expenditure. You'll find that most of the time the media focuses on revenue, to the point where even counties are now being pressured. They don't collect revenue. The issue is not about revenue. The issue is about the public expenditure. In life, even as an individual, you'll have to learn to live within your means.
Sure.
But even when you have money,
but there are exceptions.
But even when you have money as an individual, it's about how you spend. If you are extravagant, if you spend money instead of spending on food, you're spending on electronics, and your children starve, or entertainment, you go to the bars and to the nightclubs, that's wastage. What's happening in this government is similar. We have the money, we have the resources, whether it's borrowed or it's whatever. By the way, there's nothing called borrowed. Every money that is spent there, 3.6 trillion, is public. It's taxpayers' money.
Correct.
At the end of the day, it's your money. There is no one else giving you money from. Don't be cheated that there's another money called loans. So it's all our money. So it's about the spending. We have misplaced priorities. So that the questions that we should be asking in this budget, if I were on the other side of this table, is about, look, we have spent billions or trillions in infrastructure. You've done all those things. You've said you've spent it here and spent it here. What is the impact of that money? This is what we need to be
about
discussing.
Monitoring and evaluation.
Yeah, it's about the impact. The government, when they came up, for example, with SGR, 500, 600 billion, they said, you will see the outcome in the next 2 or 3 years. So 5 years down the road, we want to see what is the return on that investment.
All right.
And those are the things, really, that we need to be dealing with. Unfortunately, there isn't much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kero. And we'll be coming to you, Mr. Gishinga, shortly. Well, live pictures there, the CS for the National Treasury, Ukur Yatani, just a few meters to get to the gates of the National Assembly. And we also are joined by Mr. Kwame Owino, the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Economic Affairs. And a very good afternoon to you, Mr. Owino. If you can hear me, what is top of mind right now, even as the CS is about to read the budget speech to Kenyans?
Well, I think as Bill Kero has mentioned, yes, there's nothing that's new. I think what we are waiting to see is what narrative that the Cabinet Secretary will use to explain the numbers in terms of what's the justification for both the size of the budget. I think the question of public debt is top of everybody's mind, and he needs to assure Parliament. I don't think he'll be successful, but he needs to assure Parliament that public spending is under control and that the budget statements, rather that the public debt balance as we see today is something that's well in control. It isn't. I think if the budget numbers suggest that obviously within another 2 months, he'll have to be back to Parliament to ask for an extension of the budget ceilings. Besides that, basically it's just the prioritization and whether there's sufficient money for the stimulus that government was speaking about last year. And then finally, it'll be just about the finance bill. I think that's where most of the political fights should be, if you ask me, because some of the ways in which money is going to be raised would fundamentally affect Kenya's taxation policy quite a bit. And that's taxation policy under Articles 209 to 212 are the domain of Parliament. And I think Parliament needs to interrogate this year's finance bill more critically than they've done before. Yeah.
And Mr. Owino, speaking about the debt issue, we are currently at a debt position of about 7.4 trillion shillings. We recently increased our debt ceiling to 9 trillion. Are we foreseeing another request to further raise the debt ceiling? And what are the dangers of this for an economy of our size?
Well, the debt ceiling is not 7.2 trillion shillings. The debt ceiling today is about 8.4 trillion, all factors considered. So what that tells you is that there's an additional borrowing of about 700 billion that's expected this year. So once this budget approval, or rather the appropriations, is done, it means that the Cabinet Secretary will have to come back to Parliament. So regardless of what happens, the debt ceiling is going to have to be raised. That's a given. what that means is then we, as citizens, have to start asking members of parliament, what does this debt ceiling actually mean if you're extending it every 8 or so months in the last 3 years or so? So that's an important question. I think I'm also concerned about the quantum of public debt in general. Of course, what the cabinet secretary is going to do, he has few options. He's trying to stretch the tenure of debt by replacing low interest debt for the higher interest and commercial debts that have been the most damaging in relative terms. But I think the dependence of debt in the economy, including Kenya's finance sector, if you look at the debt redemption of about 1.1 trillion, about 600, 700, 1.1 trillion, more than 600, almost 700 billion of that is actually owed to domestic banks and financial institutions. It means, therefore, that government spending and government debt payments are a significant portion of the finances and even the profits of many of Kenya's banks. That's not a very good position to be in. And government is going to borrow some more, crowding out private sector and obviously bank lending to whether SMEs or businesses is being reduced by government's huge appetite for that. So those are two things that we're going to actually have to monitor very, very closely. But it's not a rosy picture. And I think some of the interviews that I've seen, the cabinet secretary has to maintain confidence on the face. But it's something I'm very, very worried about, and we continue to monitor. It's not a good place to be. This kind of budgeting is not a good place to be in, regardless of how it goes with Parliament today.
Okay. Not a good place to be is the words Kwame Weno is using. I can see Mr. Kero, you're itching to respond. Before we get your reaction, let's hear Mr. Gishinga as well. And of course, a lot of issues raised around the debt situation, as well as how we're going to finance this budget.
Indeed, and thank you very much for having me, Abi. Debt is a big issue, and there are two parts to the debt. There is the expenditure part, and there is the revenue part. Everybody has taken on the expenditure part in terms of, can we reduce wastage? Can we tighten corruption? Can we be able to reduce the revenue leaks? I think there's still opportunity on the revenue side, particularly at the county level. I like what, for example, Nakuru has done in terms of creating the Nakuru Revenue Authority. So I think there's big opportunity in terms of non-consumption tax. Every time we talk about tax in Kenya, there seems to be a focus on consumption tax, which is VAT. So I think if we can be able to expand the county capacity, devolve more functions, then the national government can have much, much fewer functions, and we'll have to borrow less. So I think the conversation needs to be on how do we reduce the expenditure, or how do we manage it, but also how do we increase revenue? Because when you have a budget where taxes are only comprising of 57% of the budget, then it shows you then you're getting into a very difficult position.
All right. Live pictures there. CS Ukur Yatani just posing for the battery of journalists and photographers who are trying to get a glimpse of every moment as he is getting ready to get into Parliament. Well, those are the last moments before he makes his way into the National Assembly chambers, where he'll be addressing the country and tabling this year's national budget. Well, former Senator Kero, let me ask you, we've talked about raising the revenues as a country. At the same time, the common man is saying we've already overburdened. You want to come back to us saying you want to introduce more tax on fuel, you want to take the price of bread up. Border, there's a proposal to have the tax also go up. Is the government running out of options in regards to tax and revenue?
No, it's not. The government is not running out of any option. The government has an option, of cutting down expenditure. That is where it's not about revenue. I think all this debate about raising revenue is completely misplaced, and that is why you see government raiding bread. 8 million kids have to go to school every morning and take bread. You tell them you increase the price by 16%. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Border is the most common form of transport today to the ordinary people. You tell them you want to pay just because you want to raise revenue. No, and then you now tell counties also raise revenue. The situation will be worse. So the issue is not revenue. The issue is the government must cut down its expenditure. That's the bottom line, and that's what the government is not doing. Last night I watched the CS talking about this budget, and he has his focus is not on expenditure, because you must really look at the fact that you have a poor country. This is a country where half the population is under poverty. We have the other half suffering from COVID, effects and, in the last 2 years. So you don't have that luxury of trying to have, I was just looking at the budget. If you look at the budget estimates, which was being read here earlier, the Defense Ministry is spending more than the Ministry of Education. Ministry of Education, basic education, we're not at war. You look at some of the expenditures of some of the ministries, and you just get shocked. Where is all that money going? It's about inefficiency.
We need to reprioritize?
Yeah, it's about misplaced priorities. And because some of this infrastructure, for example, the budget policy statement, when it was tabled in Parliament in February, the Parliament itself, through the budget office, was categorical. They said government must cut down expenditure, particularly on infrastructure, those areas which is taking a lot of the money. Because the return, the outcome, it's not there. It's not being felt. And according to World Bank last year, more than 60 or 2/3 of the growth in our revenue is private sector driven. So it's not about pumping money into government. It doesn't help the economy grow. You need to pump in the money, leave money in the pockets of people. Let businesses reduce the taxes. Let small enterprises and businesses have the opportunity to grow, to expand, to do. It's not about government spending. We have a situation where government believes collect the money from the people and we spend for you. It's not, because you're not growing the economy. And this is hype. A government whose economy contracted by 0.6% last year is telling you this year it will recover to 6.5% growth. I mean, if you give us all that tax.
So are you saying the government is more focused on good GDP numbers?
I think, I mean, look, first of all, we are not talking of growth.
Yeah.
It's about a recovery.
Yeah.
You're going from 0.6 last year contraction, to 6 point whatever.
And of course, this is not in isolation.
The average in Africa,
other economies also
the sub-Saharan Africa average is below 3.
Yeah.
Where are you getting the 6.5? But okay, the point I'm making is that the issue really is this budget is not about the people. We should always be looking about the effects of the problems people are having. It's not the time to really hurt the people directly.
Let me listen to what Mr. Kwame Owino has to say about this in regards to money to the pockets of Kenyans.
Well, I think my point is this, that it's true. Last year's growth was very poor, partly occasioned by the fact that there was COVID. Obviously, people had to stay home, and that recovery has not fully taken place. So this is a